Hi everybody, here's a few videos to help you with the math summer assignments for topics that you might find more challenging than others. One of them being binomial expansions, which is question 5, and this is for pre-calculus and IB math summer assignment. We're asked to find the binomial expansion and to simplify it of 2x minus 1 to the 5th power. We're raising it to the 5th power, so we're going to use the binomial expansion, which would be x plus y to the 5th power. And here's the setup. X to the 5th plus 5x to the 4th y plus 10x cubed y squared plus 10x squared y cubed plus 5x y to the 4th plus y to the 5th. And basically what's happening here is as you move from left to right, your powers of x are dropping. You're going from x to the 5th to x to the 4th to x to the 3rd, etc. In the same manner, your powers of y are increasing. Over here we don't have a power of y because it's y to the 0 power, which is a 1. But right here we have y to the 1st, y squared, y cubed, etc. And then a little word about the coefficients. Those follow a triangle known as Pascal's triangle. This coefficient is a 1, over here is a 5, a 10, a 10, a 5, and a 1. And again, those are numbers that come from the coefficients of Pascal's triangle. What we're going to do here is we're going to treat 2x as the x term, so that beginning part of the binomial would be treated as the 2x. So we're going to trade out, wherever we see an x, we're going to substitute a 2x. In the same way, we have the y, which is the second piece of this binomial, which would be the negative 1. So we're going to trade out the y to be a negative 1. We're going to make those substitutions into the original setup. So right here we are going to take x to the 5th power, so that's going to be traded out for 2x to the 5th power. And then we're going to add on our next term. Our next term would be 5 times x to the 4th. So I'm going to again trade out the x to be 2x. I'm using purple to represent the x term and red to represent the y term, and blacking for everything else. So we have 2x, and that's being raised to the 4th power. Also in that term you have the y, which is going to be traded out in red with a negative 1. Moving on to your next term, we're going to add on 10x cubed. So in purple I'm going to trade out the x for 2x, and I'm going to cube that. Also in that term you have y squared. The y is in red, negative 1, and we're going to square that. Moving on to your next term, we're going to add on 10, and then you have x squared. Again, x is in purple, so we're going to trade that out. We're going to square that. And then you have your y term, which is in red, negative 1 is the substitution, and that's going to be raised to the 3rd power, y to the 3rd power. Your next term is going to be plus coefficient of that term is a 5. Going to trade out the x to be the 2x. That piece is in purple. That's to the 1st power, so we can just leave that alone. And we're going to make the y in red, negative 1 again as the y substitution. Raise that to the 4th power. And then at the end, you add on y to the 5th power. So we're going to add on y in red to be a negative 1, raise that to the 5th power. And now we're going to have to do all these substitutions. You could, of course, use your calculator to assist with all of this. First term, you have 2x to the 5th power. 2 has to be raised to the 5th power. You could do that on your calculator, or you might just know offhand that it's 32. And then x is also raised to the 5th power. And then we're going to add on 5, okay, times, you're not going to raise 5 to the 4th power, but you definitely will raise 2 to the 4th power and the x to the 4th. So 2 to the 4th power would be 16. And then you have x to the 4th power, and then this is multiplied by negative 1. Moving on to your next term, with each series of steps you're going to substitute even more. Now you're going to bring down the 10, just as in the case before. The coefficient is not raised to the power, but the 2 and the x would be raised to the 3rd power. So you're going to get 2 cubed is 8, and x cubed And then you have negative 1 to the second power. If you square negative 1, it would be a positive 1. We're going to trade that out. On our next line, we have our next term, rather, we have 10 times 2 squared, which is 4. And then you have x squared, which is x squared. And then negative 1 cubed would still stay a negative 1. That could be done in the calculator. Just use parentheses. Be sure to use those. Add on 5 times 2x to the first power, which is just going to remain the same. Negative 1 to the fourth power. If you're raising negative 1 to any even power, it's going to come out to be a positive 1. If you're raising negative 1 to an odd power, it's going to come out to be a negative 1. And then at the end, we have plus negative 1 to the fifth power. Since that's an odd power, that's really the same as adding on a negative 1. So that's your first set of substitutions and simplifications. Keep reducing. Bring down 30 to x to the fifth. You can't do anything else with that. However, next what you can do is you can multiply these coefficients. You have a 5, you have a 16, and a negative 1. And that's going to come out to be a negative 80 x to the fourth power. Plus, you're going to see how it's getting more condensed, rather, as we move along. 10 times 8 times 1 is going to be an 80 x cubed. And then you're going to have 10 times 4, which is 40, times negative 1, which is negative 40 x squared. Again, you're seeing the powers of x are dropping. And since we traded out the y for negative 1, the powers of y are leaving. And then you have 5 times 2 times 1, which is going to be a 10x. And then at the end you have minus 1. This is your complete substitution and simplification of that binomial expansion.